Cade Morrison had been on Vayara for exactly 3 hours when he decided the Thessians were possibly the most impractical civilization he'd ever encountered. Their capital city was beautiful, all soaring architecture and carefully cultivated gardens, but their military installations looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd read about warfare in a very old book and decided aesthetics were more important than function. He was standing in the Grand Citadel's central courtyard, ostensibly waiting for his appointment with High Counselor Varath, actually trying to figure out why anyone would put decorative fountains in what was supposed to be a defensive position. The Thessians were an old species, sophisticated and cultured, known throughout this sector for their diplomatic corps and artistic achievements. Military prowess was not their strong suit, which was probably why they'd hired a human. Humans had a reputation in this part of space, mostly involving words like aggressive, unpredictable, and disturbingly good at violence. Cade had left Earth 6 years ago after a training accident shattered his left leg and ended his career as a military instructor. The leg had healed eventually, with the help of alien medical technology that Earth couldn't afford, but his position in the service hadn't survived the recovery period. So he'd gone freelance, taking contract work teaching combat skills to species who needed them and were willing to pay. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him busy and gave him a reason to wake up in the morning. "Mr. Morrison," a voice called from across the courtyard. Cade turned to see a Thessian official approaching, tall and elegant in formal robes that probably cost more than Cade had earned in the last year. "The High Counselor will see you now." He followed through corridors lined with artwork that museums back on Earth would have committed crimes to possess, finally arriving at a chamber that managed to be both austere and opulent. High Counselor Varath was waiting, a distinguished Thessian with those characteristic long ears and the kind of posture that came from generations of political authority. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming," Varath began without preamble. "I understand you have an excellent reputation as a combat instructor." Cade shrugged. "I'm good at teaching people to fight. Whether that's excellent depends on your standards. Direct. Good." Varath gestured to a seat and Cade took it. "I have an unusual assignment for you. It involves training someone for the Royal Guard trials. The trials are in 90 days, and the candidate is," he paused, "somewhat unconventional." Cade had worked with enough alien species to know that unconventional could mean anything from physically unusual to politically problematic. What kind of unconventional? The candidate is Princess Liara, third in line to the throne. She has volunteered to attempt the Royal Guard trials. That didn't sound particularly unconventional until Cade remembered something from his briefing materials. "Wait, third in line, she." Varath's expression remained neutral. "Yes. No Thessian woman has ever served in the Royal Guard. The trials have always been exclusively male." "Ah, that kind of unconventional, and she wants to try. She insists on trying. Her father, the Emperor, has agreed to permit it, though many in the court believe this is a mistake that will only reinforce why women are unsuited for military service." Cade could already see the political minefield. If she fails publicly, it sets back any progress toward gender equality. If she doesn't try, nothing changes. "Exactly." Varath leaned forward. "I've reviewed your record, Mr. Morrison. You've trained 17 different species in combat techniques adapted to their physiology and culture. You have a gift for seeing potential others miss. Can you do this? Can you take someone with no combat training and prepare them for the most grueling military trial in Thessian culture in 90 days? The honest answer was probably not. The Royal Guard trials were designed to test candidates who'd been training since childhood. 90 days was nothing. But Cade had learned a long time ago that impossible was just another word for difficult, and he'd made a career out of difficult. "I'll need complete access to the princess, no interference from the court, and authority to design the training program without oversight." "Agreed. And I'll need to meet her first. This only works if she's actually committed." If she's doing this on a whim or to make a political statement, we're wasting everyone's time. Verath nodded and signaled to an attendant. A few minutes later, a woman entered the chamber. Princess Liara was not what Cade expected. The briefing materials had shown formal portraits, all ceremonial robes and carefully arranged hair, the kind of images that revealed nothing about the actual person. In person, she was tall for a Thessian woman, moving with the unconscious grace of someone trained in court etiquette since birth. Her ears, those distinctive long ears that marked her species, were elegant and expressive. She wore simpler clothing than in the portraits, practical rather than ornate, and her dark eyes met his with a directness that suggested intelligence and determination. "Your Highness," Cade said, inclining his head in what he hoped was appropriate respect. He'd never been great at royal protocol. Princess Liara studied him with the same intensity he'd been using to study her. "You're the human instructor. Guilty." He gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Mind if we talk?" She sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, every inch the composed royal. Cade decided to dispense with diplomatic niceties. "Why do you want to do this?" "To prove I can," she answered immediately. "To prove that Thessian women are as capable as men in every arena, including this one. To change a system that has held my people back for centuries. Noble goals. But here's the thing about the Royal Guard trials. They don't care about your goals. They're designed to break people who have been training their whole lives. You're starting from zero with 90 days to prepare. The odds of success are," he paused, "not good. I understand that. Then why? And don't give me the political answer. I want the real reason." The composure cracked slightly, revealing something more genuine underneath. "Because I'm tired of being decorative. I'm tired of being the princess who smiles at diplomatic functions and has no real purpose beyond eventually marrying whoever provides the best political alliance. I'm intelligent, I'm capable, and I'm completely wasted in my current role. The Guard trials are the most respected challenge in our culture. If I pass, no one can dismiss me again." "Fair enough." Cade leaned back in his seat. "Here's what I need from you: total commitment. We train every day, probably twice a day. It's going to hurt, you're going to want to quit, and I'm going to push you harder than anyone has ever pushed you before. I don't do gentle, I don't do encouraging speeches, and I definitely don't do special treatment for royalty. If you can't handle that, tell me now. I can handle it. We'll see." He stood. "Meet me at the training grounds tomorrow at dawn. Wear something you can move in and be prepared to discover muscles you didn't know you had." Liara rose as well, meeting his eyes with that same steady determination. "I'll be there." Cade watched her leave, then turned to Verath. 90 days to turn a princess into a warrior. This is going to be interesting. Day 1 began at dawn with Princess Liara arriving at the training grounds exactly on time, wearing practical exercise clothing that looked newly purchased. Cade was already there, having spent the previous evening reviewing Thessian physiology and the specific requirements of the Royal Guard trials. He'd identified approximately 17 ways this could go catastrophically wrong, but he'd learned to ignore that kind of thinking. "We're starting with basics," he told her without preamble. "Conditioning, strength, endurance. The Guard trials include a combat section, but if you don't have the physical foundation, technique won't matter." What followed was 2 hours of work that left Liara shaking and drenched in sweat, running laps around the training ground, bodyweight exercises adapted to Thessian physiology, core strengthening, balance work. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just the fundamental building blocks of combat readiness. Liara pushed through without complaint, though Cade could see her struggling. She had the cardiovascular endurance of someone who'd spent her life walking palace corridors and dancing at formal events, which was to say not nearly enough. Her upper body strength was minimal and her core stability needed serious work. But she didn't quit and she didn't ask for breaks. When they finally stopped, she was breathing hard, face flushed, but her eyes were still determined. "Tomorrow, same time," Cade said. "We do this every morning. Then we add afternoon sessions next week." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and limped away toward the palace. Cade watched her go and allowed himself the smallest hint of optimism, determination he could work with. The first 2 weeks established a brutal routine, morning conditioning sessions that gradually increased in intensity and duration. Afternoon lessons where Cade began teaching the absolute fundamentals of combat movement, stance, footwork, and how to fall without injuring yourself. Liara showed up every single day, exhausted from the previous session but refusing to miss a single hour. She threw up twice during the second week from pushing too hard, apologized both times, and immediately returned to training. "The problem," Cade explained during one afternoon session, "is that everything about your movement is trained for court life. You move like someone trying to be graceful and inoffensive. Combat requires the opposite. You need to be efficient and explosive." He demonstrated a basic strike, his movement sharp and direct. "See the difference?" Liara tried to copy him, and the result was technically correct but completely lacking in power or commitment. "It's harder than it looks," she said, frustrated. "Everything worth doing is." Again. By the end of week 2, she was starting to show physical changes. Muscle definition appearing in her arms and core, better cardiovascular endurance, movement that was becoming more natural, less inhibited by years of courtly restraint. And then, during a sparring exercise where Cade was teaching her to respond to being grabbed, she managed to execute a throw that actually worked. Cade hit the mat with enough force to knock the air from his lungs, and for a moment they both froze in surprise. "I'm so sorry," Liara said immediately, extending a hand to help him up. "That was completely perfect," Cade interrupted, accepting her hand and getting to his feet. "That was exactly right. Do it again." A smile broke across her face, the first genuinely joyful expression he'd seen from her. "Really? Really? Now let's figure out how you did it so you can replicate it." That evening, reviewing the day's work, Cade updated his assessment. 90 days still wasn't enough time, but maybe, just maybe, it was enough time to give her a fighting chance. Week 3 brought weapons training. The Royal Guard trials included both unarmed combat and proficiency with traditional Theshan blades, elegant curved weapons that required precision and control. Cade had trained with similar weapons before, and had spent time studying Theshan blade techniques to understand what the trials would demand. "Your people's blade work is actually pretty sophisticated," he told Liara as he handed her a training weapon. "It emphasizes economy of motion and defensive positioning. That plays to your strengths. You're quick and you think strategically." She took the blade, testing its weight and balance. "It feels strange." "That's because you've probably only held ceremonial versions," Cade said. "This is weighted for actual use. The balance is different. Show me how your people traditionally hold it." Liara demonstrated the formal grip she'd learned for court ceremonies, and Cade immediately adjusted it. "Close, but you want your hand positioned here for better control, and your stance needs to be lower, more grounded. Like this." He showed her and she mimicked his position. "Better. Now, basic cuts. We'll start with the 8 fundamental angles of attack your tradition uses." Over the next several weeks, blade work became integrated into their daily training. Mornings were still conditioning and fundamental combat skills. Afternoons shifted to weapons practice, tactical thinking, and scenario work. Cade brought in training partners from the Citadel Guard, low-level soldiers who were curious about the human training the princess. Liara learned to spar against opponents who wouldn't hold back out of royal courtesy, taking hits and learning from them. Word spread through the palace. Courtiers began finding excuses to walk past the training grounds, watching the princess covered in sweat and bruises, working with an intensity that scandalized the traditional elements of Theshan society. High-ranking military officers visited, their skepticism obvious, making comments just loud enough for Liara to hear about how the trials would expose this foolishness. Cade noticed she trained harder after each visit. By week 8, Liara could hold her own in controlled sparring matches. She was faster than Cade, her Thessian physiology giving her an edge in reaction time, and she developed an instinct for reading opponents that came from her years of political observation. She still lacked the raw power of larger opponents, but she was learning to use technique and timing to compensate. During one evening session, after a particularly good performance, Cade allowed himself a rare moment of praise. "You're getting good at this." Liara, cooling down after 2 hours of intensive sparring, smiled tiredly. "Good enough. For what we're trying to accomplish. Maybe. You're not there yet, but you're further along than I thought possible 8 weeks ago." She was quiet for a moment, then looked at him directly. "Why did you take this assignment, Cade?" "The real reason. You could have refused." He considered deflecting, then decided she'd earned honesty. "Because I used to be good at something that mattered, and then I got hurt. And for 6 years I've been good at something that doesn't matter much to anyone, including me. Training you matters. If we pull this off, it changes things for your entire species. That's worth the effort." "What happened?" "The injury, training accident. Explosion during a field exercise that shouldn't have gone wrong but did. 3 people died, and I spent 8 months learning to walk again. By the time I was cleared for duty, my position had been filled and there were no openings for a crippled instructor with trauma issues." She absorbed this information with the careful attention she brought to everything. "I'm sorry, don't be, it brought me here." He stood, gathering equipment. "Same time tomorrow, Your Highness." "And Liara?" "Yes. Stop apologizing every time you land a hit. In combat, that's called success." Week 9 marked a shift in training intensity. Cade arranged for Liara to begin working with actual Royal Guard candidates, young Thessian males who were 6 months into their own preparation for the trials. The first session was humbling. Liara faced off against a candidate named Varrock who had been training in combat since childhood, and he systematically dismantled every technique she'd learned, defeating her in under 30 seconds. When she rose from the mat, breathing hard and clearly frustrated, Cade was making notes. Again, he called out. Same opponent. She lost 7 consecutive matches against Varrock. But in the 8th match, she managed to land a solid hit before being taken down, and in the 10th match, she lasted almost 2 minutes. By the end of the session, Varrock was breathing as hard as she was. "You're improving," the young candidate admitted grudgingly. "Still not good enough for the trials, but better than I expected from he caught himself, from someone starting so late." Liara, to her credit, didn't rise to the implicit insult. Instead, she bowed formally and asked him to return for additional training sessions. Over the next several weeks, she worked with a rotating group of candidates, each bringing different fighting styles and approaches. She lost more than she won, but the gap was closing. Cade introduced more complex training elements, tactical scenarios where Liara had to command small units in simulated combat situations, drawing on her political instincts to make strategic decisions under pressure. Endurance challenges that combined physical exertion with problem-solving, forcing her to think clearly while exhausted. Psychological pressure exercises designed to test composure when everything was going wrong. The tactical work revealed Liara's natural strengths. She could read a battlefield the way she read a political situation, identifying leverage points and predicting opponents' moves. Her strategic thinking impressed even the skeptical military observers who occasionally watched the training sessions. One evening, after a particularly successful tactical exercise, Cade found her sitting alone in the training ground, looking exhausted but thoughtful. "You're good at the strategy part," he observed, sitting down nearby. "Really good. Better than most of the candidates who have been studying military theory for years." She glanced at him. "Politics and warfare aren't as different as people think. Both are about reading situations, understanding motivations, and knowing when to press an advantage or make a strategic retreat." "Exactly. The combat skills are important, but they're not everything. The trials test the complete package: physical prowess, tactical thinking, leadership ability, and mental resilience. You're stronger in some areas than candidates who'll beat you in pure fighting. That has to count for something, does it? She sounded uncertain, and Cade recognized the doubt that crept in during the hardest parts of training. When I watch them spar, those candidates who have trained their whole lives, I wonder if I'm deluding myself. 90 days against 20 years of preparation. How is that supposed to be enough? It's not, Cade said bluntly. You're not going to be the best fighter in the trials, but you don't have to be the best. You have to be good enough. The Guard doesn't just want warriors, they want leaders. They want people who can think under pressure and inspire others. Those are skills you already have. They watched the sun set over the citadel, the sky turning shades of purple and gold that didn't exist on Earth. You've changed since we started, Liara said quietly. You seem less, she searched for the word, less lost. Cade smiled slightly. Training you gave me something I haven't had in a long time, a mission that matters. I was floating before this, taking meaningless contracts and pretending it was enough. This is the first thing I've done in 6 years that feels like it actually means something. I'm glad, she said. And Cade, I'm grateful you're here. For what it's worth, so am I by week 12. The transformation was undeniable. Liara had gained visible muscle. Her movements were confident and controlled, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. She could spar competitively with Guard candidates, win tactical scenarios against experienced officers, and complete endurance challenges that would have destroyed the princess who'd shown up on day 1. But the trials were designed to push beyond what any individual thought possible, and Cade knew the real test was still ahead. The final 2 weeks focused on integration and simulation. Cade constructed mock trial scenarios based on everything he'd learned about the actual tests. Combat sequences that combined multiple opponents with tactical decisions. Leadership challenges where Liara had to command teams while under physical stress. Psychological tests designed to break concentration and reveal character under pressure. She performed well, better than Cade had dared hope. But well might not be enough, and they both knew it. The night before the trials, Cade found Liara in the training ground one last time, running through blade forms in the moonlight. He watched for a moment before speaking. You're going to do this, he said. I know you don't believe it right now, but you're ready. She completed the form before turning to face him. Am I? Or are you just saying what an instructor is supposed to say? I'm saying what's true. You've done everything I asked and more. You've worked harder than any student I've ever trained. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into those trials and show every doubter exactly what you're capable of. And if I fail, then you fail having given everything you had, but I don't think you're going to fail. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, Cade, for believing in me when no one else did. He smiled. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe in something again. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day. The Royal Guard trials began at dawn with 64 candidates assembled in the Citadel's grand arena. 63 were male, all of them having trained for this moment since early adolescence. One was Princess Liara, who had 90 days of preparation and everything to prove. Cade watched from the observation platform reserved for trainers and family members, surrounded by Thessian military elite who made no effort to hide their skepticism. He'd done everything he could. Now it was up to her. The first day tested pure combat ability. Individual matches in ascending difficulty, starting with basic sparring and progressing to full-contact fights with traditional weapons. Liara won her first 3 matches convincingly, using speed and technique to overcome opponents who underestimated her. The 4th match was harder, against an opponent who didn't make that mistake, but she adapted mid-fight and secured victory. By the end of day 1, she'd advanced to the next round, placing in the top 32 candidates. The observation platform buzzed with surprised conversation. The second day focused on tactical scenarios. Small unit command exercises where candidates had to achieve objectives, while managing limited resources and unpredictable complications. This was where Liara excelled. While other candidates relied on brute force approaches, she employed strategy that came from years of political maneuvering. She outthought opponents who tried to outfight her, secured objectives others missed, and demonstrated leadership that impressed even the skeptical military observers. By the end of day 2, she'd moved into the top 15. Cade allowed himself to hope. The third and final day was the Endurance Challenge, a brutal combination of physical obstacles, combat scenarios, and psychological pressure designed to break anyone who wasn't absolutely committed. Candidates who'd seemed invincible on day 1 collapsed from exhaustion. Others made tactical errors under stress that eliminated them from consideration. Liara pushed through, drawing on reserves of determination that Cade recognized from their training. He watched her scale obstacles that should have been beyond her reach, fight through pain that would have stopped someone with less motivation, and refuse to quit even when everything hurt. When the final scores were announced, Princess Liara placed 7th out of 64 candidates. She'd outperformed 57 males who'd trained their entire lives, including several favorites who'd been expected to dominate. The arena fell silent as the results were displayed, then erupted into confused conversation. The Royal Guard Commandant, a grizzled veteran named General Thane who'd been openly dismissive of Liara's attempt, approached the candidates. By tradition, all candidates who place in the top 10 are offered positions in the Royal Guard, he announced, his voice carrying across the arena. His eyes found Liara and something complicated crossed his face. Princess Liara, 7th place. The first woman to not only attempt but pass the trials. Welcome to the Guard. The formal induction ceremony was that evening. Liara stood among 9 other successful candidates, all of them male, all of them looking at her with expressions ranging from respect to confusion to resentment. When she received her Guard uniform and insignia, marking her as the first female member in Theshan history, the crowd's reaction was mixed. Conservative elements looked scandalized. Progressive voices cheered. And the military leadership looked like they were trying to process something that contradicted everything they thought they knew. Cade found her afterward, away from the crowds and celebrations. She was still in uniform, looking exhausted and triumphant and slightly overwhelmed. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Maybe, but you're the one who showed up every day. You're the one who pushed through when it hurt. You're the one who stood in that arena and proved everyone wrong." She smiled, and it was the most genuine expression he'd seen from her. "What happens now? Now you serve in the Guard, you do the job you've earned, and you show every young Theshan woman watching that they're capable of anything. And you, what will you do?" Cade had been thinking about that. He'd planned to leave Vayara after the trials, move on to the next contract, continue the pattern of rootless drifting that had defined the past 6 years. But something had changed over these 90 days. "Before I go," Liara said quietly, "I have an offer for you. My father, the Emperor, was impressed by your work. He's authorized creation of a new position, Royal Combat Instructor. The job would be to train the next generation of Guard candidates, incorporating the techniques that helped me succeed. No gender restrictions, no traditional limitations, just finding and developing potential regardless of where it comes from." She paused. "I recommended you for the position if you want it." Cade stared at her. "You want me to stay, train more candidates like you? I want you to help change our entire military culture. You showed me what was possible. Imagine what you could do with students who start younger, train longer, and have institutional support. You could transform the Theshan Guard into something truly extraordinary." It was the kind of mission he'd thought he'd lost forever when the explosion shattered his leg and his career. Purpose, impact, the chance to build something that mattered. "When do I start?" Liara's smile widened. "Tomorrow, if you're willing. Though perhaps we could start slightly later than dawn this time. I think we've both earned a few hours of extra sleep." "Fair enough." Cade extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement, and after a moment's hesitation, Liara clasped it. Same team, same team. Later that evening, Cade stood on the Citadel's walls looking out at the city below. Somewhere down there, young Thessian women were hearing about Princess Liara's achievement, about the first woman to join the royal guard, about what was now possible. And tomorrow, he'd begin building a training program that would give them the tools to follow her path. 90 days had transformed a princess into a warrior, but maybe more importantly, 90 days had transformed a broken veteran into someone whole again, someone with purpose and direction, and a mission that actually mattered.